so many people have said, like, we have Hollywood to thank for that, because they've always made mass murderers or some type of crazy serial killer always look like a person of Caucasian descent, you know? So it's kind of like, and yeah, this is the reason why Candyman scared the crap out of me, which we will not talk about in this episode. Y'all don't be judging me, because Candyman, that wasn't right. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? I'm your host, Karen Smith. Welcome back to the God Spot podcast. Do me a favor, take a moment to like this video. If you're not already a part of the family, please take a moment and subscribe. And today we are back with episode 10 regarding mental health, because we are doing a Mental Health Awareness Month. We're focusing in on that. I have my lovely co-host with me tonight, my wife, who is behind the camera. She'll be accompanying us. And we're picking up kind of where we left off last pod. We were talking about self-care. We kind of did a part 1 and 2 to that. So please go back and check that out. That was pretty dope. Self-care was fun. Today we're going to talk about mental health a little bit and therapy. We're not going to go too deep in it, but we're going to touch on some things, use maybe a couple of personal examples, and then, we're just going to keep it pushing with some statistics on mental health on the next app. But we're not going to go too far into that because I don't want to spoil it. No. So first on the agenda, babe, is what is mental health? So I can read that for us. Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act, and helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. Mental health is important at every stage of life, from adulthood and adolescence through adulthood. From childhood and adolescence through adulthood. Over the course of your life, if you experience mental health problems, your thinking, mood, and behavior could be affected.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So I think something to touch on with this, something that stood out to me right away, was how it talked about mental health is important throughout every aspect of your life. Childhood, adolescence, and through adulthood. Yeah. I think sometimes, especially in our culture, we can think that mental health might only pertain to those who are ill, in a sense where maybe we can see something physically wrong with them. Yeah. Maybe even they're displaying certain behaviors that show that something's psychologically wrong with them. And I think we kind of put mental health in that category, historically anyway, as those are people who deal with mental health issues, whereas today, it's a lot more, it's more widely spoken about, it's more openly spoken about.
Yeah, definitely. So I just think there wasn't a lot of things, like a lot, technology started to upgrade and all this stuff, and tests, they started to run more, so there was a lot of things that they couldn't even classify, or they didn't even know about to classify people with.
Yeah, for sure. Like when we went over generational data, I mean, for a lot of the vets from World War I, World War II, even the Vietnam War, a lot of those people came home with things severely wrong with them. And for some of that, there was just no name for it. Yeah. There was nothing to kind of put on it. Maybe the person was just, I was doing some research, and some doctors would say to some of the vets, like, oh, you're just overwhelmed with coming home, or you just miss your comrades. And I'm thinking to myself, like, there's definitely something more than that wrong, but when you don't have the verbiage, you just don't have it. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And a lot of people suffered in silence because of that. There's stories that I have from my buddies in the Marine Corps, their grandfathers, their dads, like my friends in the Navy, my friends in the Air Force. So, yeah, it was pretty bad around that time for there to just be no verbiage for what was happening. But now, there is some, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So I wanted to touch on therapy as well, because a lot of the time we kind of discount therapy as to something that that's only for crazy people, right? We talked about this a little bit, but historically, therapy was not something that was spoken about in my house, where we have two very different experiences with that. You actually heard therapy a lot in your house.
Too much.
Right? So whereas in my home, it wasn't, therapy was like never ever spoken about. And if it was always in the light of those crazy, our counterparts that may not have as much melanin as I do, let's say it like that, right? So which I always thought was interesting, but as I got older, looking back, having so many conversations with people doing the research on this stuff, like so many people have said, like, we have Hollywood to thank for that, because they've always made mass murderers or some type of crazy serial killer always look like a person of Caucasian descent, so it's kind of like, and this is the reason why Candyman scared the crap out of me, which we will not talk about in this episode. Y'all don't be judging me, because Candyman, that wasn't right. But so let's talk about therapy, right? A little bit. Let's look at a definition for it. So therapy, a synonym for therapy, they're using therapeutic, right? I thought that was dope. Thank you, Merriam-Webster. So therapeutic, medical treatment of impairment, injury, disease, or disorder. I think where therapy has gotten its bad rap historically is just that first part, medical treatment. Right? Just something with the word medical and treatment, and then just something with those two words and then them being put together is kind of like, no, I'm not crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like immediately, right? But it does say of impairment, injury, disease, or disorder, right? Anxiety is a disorder. Depression, chronic depression is a disorder, right? Insomnia is a disorder. Some people have issues cutting themselves, that's a disorder. So I think that, just seeing the two words medical treatment, kind of put side by side, I don't think that should be scary to people, even though I could understand why it is. Speaking as someone that went to therapy, spent years in therapy, and even I had a stigma against therapy. And that, a lot of it was cultural. I'm not even going to cap. A lot of it was cultural. It wasn't like in my own mind, I had a reason why I didn't want to participate or ever go to therapy. It was more just like in the culture, right? The Black and Hispanic community, it's more like, we just don't do therapy.
Like, it's just not brought up. It's not something that you guys do. It's just, like you said, I'll say it, Caucasian people who, go to therapy and do stuff like that. Or...
Yeah, like for the most part, those are the kind of stigmas that I grew up around. Like, if anything about crazy was mentioned, I grew up in New York City. So, Bellevue was always brought up. If you act crazy, we're going to take you to Bellevue. Or you're going to go to Bellevue. Like, it's like things like that were brought up, which I just laugh now because thinking back, like in hindsight, that's just hilarious to me. But that's like the closest thing that we ever got to anything psychotic, therapeutic, psychological. It was really never talked about in a serious light at all in my household.
So do you think that has made you, because we have different experiences, do you think that's made you more open to when you did start therapy to jump right in there versus having it be thrown at you in a manipulating way when you were a kid, or like you're psychotic? In my experience. I
would say for sure, because we've talked about this a lot, and you've had problems sometimes, like embracing therapy in your adulthood because it was brought up so much in your childhood that in the beginning, even of us dating, like when we would first talk about it, you'd be like, I'm not crazy. It's like, I don't think you're crazy. But I can understand how, like, if it's presented to you in an adverse way, to where it's kind of like, you need this because something's wrong with you. Not like because something bad is wrong with you, or like you're not good. You know what I mean? That's not something I heard.
Yeah, and that's something I've heard from family members as well as doctors going away to certain places.
Right. Yeah. So I didn't, those things just weren't around me, like, and nothing like that, because culturally, just for people that look like me, our parents aren't talking about therapy, you know, in the house. So more parents might be doing it now.
Of course.
But, you know, like when I was growing up and when my mom was growing up, that wasn't something, you know, that was really talked about. So what it did, to get to the question that you're asking me, was I was open to it in the sense where when someone explained it to me, namely my therapist, who will remain nameless, but when she explained it to me, especially us being from two different backgrounds, it wasn't hard for me to receive. I just kind of took it like, oh, you know, like this isn't something that's only for my Caucasian counterparts. Or if someone goes to therapy, it doesn't mean like they're crazy, meaning like they need to be put in a straitjacket. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, okay, this is actually this is a normal thing. And to that point of it being normal, we did a little bit of an experiment. Remember, I told you about this experiment at work. Yeah. So me and another friend of mine chose 10 people, and we said we would go to 10 random people. Yeah. He went to 10 black people, well, 5 black people, and I went to 5 of my Caucasian counterparts. And we were asking questions about therapy. Right. Like, so what are the chances that you would go to therapy, or have you ever been? Everyone that he spoke to, no one had ever been or was even interested in going or think they needed it. Everyone that I had spoke to had been at least one time.
Wow, that's crazy.
And it's funny because we did that little experiment, and it was just a fun thing between the two of us. And of course you knew about it, but that was before I went to therapy. And remember, we talked about that, and I was like, I literally cannot believe this. I'm like, why is it that it seems like my Caucasian counterparts have no problem with going to sit down and talk to a therapist? They don't even feel ashamed about it. They'll talk about it. But it seems like everyone that looks like me or is a shade or two lighter or even darker, it seems like we don't mess with that. And I just thought that was like super intriguing.
It is very intriguing.
And before, I looked up a lot of stats,
you
know, before, because we had done something on the channel last year around a lot of like mental health and illness. Yeah. And I knew those stats, but it was even before that. Yeah. Like it was just a fun experiment. I just wanted to try, remember? And I was like, we're just going to try it out. And when I saw those results, I was like, wow, this is staggering. So that kind of led to me doing all of that on YouTube last year.
Yeah, I remember. It, you know, you mentioned some good things there too, but now that you say it, I'm like, I might have had therapy brought up to me in like a twisted way, but I know that based around the friends that I've been around, because I've been around, you know, white people, Indian, you know, different types of different nationalities, and it's like, yeah, my white friends, like, but their mothers would see a problem. And they would be like, nope, I'm not dealing with that. Like, let's go get you help. So maybe it might not come from the right spot, but then it does also. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It you know, there's some intentionality there, I guess you can say. Like, you know, they see a problem and they try to. Yeah. Whereas in our culture, it's more like, what's wrong with you? Like, cut it out. Like, stop that. Stop acting crazy.
That's hard,
you know.
Too.
Yeah, but sometimes, not that someone's crazy, but something could be going on there. Yeah. You know, so we said we would touch on this a little bit, dealing with the church. Right, concerning the church. That's gross. That's what we said we're going to talk. No, but we have to, right? We have to, because these statistics were, so last year when I did touch on this, I didn't touch too much on the church aspect of things. I definitely touched on it culturally and racially the most within different communities. Definitely spoke about the LGBTQIA plus community. Yeah. When I brought it up, but we did not touch too much on the church. So how do you feel about this? 59% of pastors are reluctant to get involved with those with acute mental illness because previous experiences strained time and resources, compared to the 41% that are not. You want me to unlock that for you, babe?
Okay.
I got you.
That's, I didn't want to interrupt.
No, it's okay. You probably can't just show it to me from that far anyway.
Yeah, that's very interesting to me, especially with the stance a pastor has, and you know, I feel like they have, of course, they're held on a higher accountability, but they also, you know, they, with their position, they should care more, and they do have a lot of compassion. So I feel like they're called to attack mental health because they're the best people that can, alongside, of course, a doctor who specializes in mental health. But
Yeah, so to that point that you say when, like in reference to a doctor, so because I've had the opportunity to, and I do call it an opportunity because I've learned a lot, because I've had the opportunity to be able to counsel people in a church setting, you know, way more from a spiritual perspective than anything, right? Because we're not professionals.
no.
I am not a licensed therapist. I have thought about it, but I don't know if I could deal with all that smoke. You kind of get some of it in ministry anyway. So yeah, but therapy has been something that I've become a huge advocate for. And I've thought about, but I am not a licensed therapist, and neither is my wife, even though her background is in the medical field. So we are really just talking to you guys from our perspectives, our experiences. So don't look at us like licensed, you know, clinicians, because we're not.
No.
But speaking about it from the aspect of church, like we can do that.
Absolutely.
So I would say to the part of the 59, which is a staggering percent. So about 60% are reluctant to get involved with those with acute mental illness because previous experience, strain time, and resources. So not having the resources on hand, just not having them on hand. You know, the pastor is not a therapist. Like, counseling can happen, but it's happening a lot more from the spiritual aspect of things, right? If this person has something going on, whether it's a chemical imbalance, they're struggling with some type of psychological disorder, or maybe even something physical that hasn't manifest itself flamboyantly, but it's there, then that person, I would say at that point, would probably need someone else alongside their pastor. So we've talked about this on several occasions, right?
Yeah.
I personally think that there should be a therapist on staff at a church.
Absolutely, I agree.
Right? Like, so everybody's not going to agree with this,
No.
right? Some people might even call me a heretic for it. I don't think that I am, but I just think that the church, because the world does pay attention to us, right? I don't think it helps when the world has all of these things in place to help people, and the church was put here specifically by Christ to do that, right? And we don't even equip ourselves, you know, the way that the world does. So if there are therapists in schools, you know, and there are therapists within corporations. Now, some people might be like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. No, but I do, because there's something called the EAP, which is an employee assistance program. And within that program, under that umbrella, you can go talk to a counselor.
Yeah, they have therapists like hospitals.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and you might at some point, they might refer you to more of a local therapist, but you can literally go through that program and have like 3 counseling sessions for free. And then they would refer you if you needed further counseling. So I just don't understand why the church wouldn't have that in place. You know, it doesn't mean that everybody in the church is crazy, you know, but there might be some things that people are dealing with. And I think that it takes some weight off of the pastor.
Absolutely, it does.
You know, I mean, some people are going to come to the pastor with some issues where it's like, okay, you clearly need someone who's a little bit more skilled because there's something else going on there. Right? I've been able to walk alongside of people, counsel people, disciple people, and see at a certain point in our walk, like, this person needs something further.
Yeah.
You know, so I've had a pastor ask me like, Kieran, why do you think the Holy Spirit had you go to therapy? You know, and at the point when that pastor asked me, I had one answer, and about 3 years later, my answer was the same but different.
Yeah.
Right? Because then I understood, oh, there's some things that I can point out, I can talk to, I can preach to, and I'm very comfortable with doing it because I've had experience in this area.
Yeah.
Like therapy is not easy.
No.
Therapy is not easy by any means. I can understand. Oh yeah, I can understand why someone wouldn't want to go because you're definitely going to touch on stuff that it's like, I don't know if I want to talk about that. I don't know if I want to deal with that. But the good thing about a licensed therapist is that they have the patience for that because they know people already do that.
Yeah, it takes time. But, you know, going back to, you know, I feel like I was reading an article the other day because I like to do a lot of research. I told you about how I feel like we should have something with pastors and, you know, stuff like, you know, just how important they are and stuff like that. But, now when it comes to pastors, I feel like they have a complex schedule. Like their duty is complex. That's what the article was saying. Like from their sermons, you know, they got a sermon prep, they got a budget, they got to do all these different things. So I feel like they do have time and you can always make time. You said it in the last episode, I don't have enough time on my hands, that's an excuse. It definitely can be. But I know it can be overbearing when they're doing it alone. And then another thing is, like Tim Ross said, you know, sometimes you have to go first to give someone else permission to go next. And I think I don't really see churches do that. You said that. Might see marriage counseling in there. But with you starting this or somebody starting this, more pastors and churches will.
Yeah, that's at least that's a hope that I have. You know, I'm sure there's probably a couple other millennials that feel that way, probably even some Gen Xers. But at this point, you know, especially the fact that we all went through a global pandemic, you know, and that affected everyone differently. Yeah. Like no two people dealt with COVID the same. Absolutely. You and I lived together, right? Married in the same house throughout the whole time of COVID, and we didn't deal with COVID the same, you know? So I just think that, you know, we have to be aware that, hey, this is a tool we might need. This is beneficial. This doesn't mean that Jesus is ineffective.
No, it doesn't. It's just, you know, it's just our part, doing our part. And we have to remember that we still have to do our part. God's there, but he wants us to do the work. Sure. You know, and he'll bless it. And I think we forget that a lot. And we try to sit there and, you know, we're like, God, you could do this. Like, you can heal me. Yeah. And sometimes that, you know, prayer and all that and being in your Bible, like that could be enough for some people. Mm-hmm. But there's people who struggle with mental illness in certain areas where it's probably almost impossible for them, especially if you say they have that, their mind is absent.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's no way. I don't care who you are. You could be already saved or not saved. If you don't have all your mind, you're not loving the Lord with all your mind.
You can't.
Period.
It's impossible.
And if you're not loving him with all your mind, you're not loving him with nothing else.
Nope. Period.
Like, and that's the horrible. That's a horrible thing about it, but it's true. Like, that's something that Christ commanded us. So why not do what you need to do to have all of your mind? You know, but I could say before I went to therapy and I worked certain things out, I did not have all of my mind. Mm-hmm. I was put together, you know, like I was good, you know, at that faking it thing. Some people are just really good at it. But at the end of the day, like I was asking myself some questions. Yeah. So like we talked about in the last pod, right? No self-care or the lack thereof makes you a worse everything, right? Yeah. And I really wanted you guys to hear my heart in that because it's not like I'm saying you're bad people. Mm-hmm. And if you have no type of self-care going on in your life, like you're just a disgusting sinner who's bad at everything. I wasn't saying that. I'm saying it makes you a worse everything because that lack of self-care, it just puts everything out of whack in your life. Mm-hmm. Like if you're lacking in self-care, there's a good chance you're not sleeping. It's a good chance you're not eating. It's a good chance you're not working out, or at least getting some sort of exercise. Even if you go for a walk or you're riding a bike, it's a good chance that you're not doing anything to replenish. You know, like maybe you're the type of person that does a lot for people. You're a very giving person, but what do you do to replenish all of that giving? You know, what do you do to fill yourself back up? So if that lack is there, definitely like a worse everything. But therapy made me a better Christian.
Yeah.
Now, this is where it can get a little touchy, right? Because I can hear it right now saying heresy. You know, you might have not even really been saved. That's borderline demonic. It's fine. I get it. Right. But at the end of the day, this is why I say this, because I was already saved. I was already a Christian, but I was a toxic Christian, and they do exist. Like you could be saved and be ratchet, like you just can be. It's just a possibility. So at the end of the day, and it's a great possibility. So at the end of the day, as I stayed in community within my church and joined small groups and continued, you know, on my journey of seminary and growing in the word and learning, I began to ask myself questions. And I truly think, I don't think, because that leaves room for doubt, right? I believe wholeheartedly, and I've had this talk with pastors, that the Holy Spirit led me to therapy, because there were questions that I started asking myself that I was never asking before.
So what question was it that you think that was it? Like that question, like awaken the Holy Spirit to lead you there, or an answer, or was just a multiple questions that led to it?
That's a great question, babe. I think back to that point in our life where we said we wouldn't talk about certain things yet because we're saving it for like a future episode.
Yeah.
But a lot of it had to do with my conversations with the Lord. Like the things that I was praying for. You know, it's something, you know, to ask God, like, Lord, like no one's ever going to be like Solomon, but I love that prayer. You know what I mean? Like to ask the Lord to give you wisdom. Like anybody can be smart. And I mean, that's honestly, once you learn the Lord, smart people aren't even impressive to you anymore.
No.
You know what I mean? So it's like anyone can be smart, but wisdom is different. You know, like a discerning spirit is different. A pure heart is different. And even if you're not a pure person at the time, but you're asking God for it. These are a lot of things that around that time in our life, because I was pretty much wrapping up school. I think I was like months away from being an official pastor. So yeah, it's just a lot of things that I was praying for, and I was asking God regarding those things. And then I started to ask myself questions, you know, like events would happen in our life and I would be like, why did I react that way? You know, and we talked about this. Some people are going to be like, well, I reacted like that because that's who I am. Okay, that's fine. But why is that who you are?
There's always more to the story. And it took you time, because you could go right into therapy, or you could go, you know, start learning more about yourself, but you won't start to ask yourself questions until you get, you know, you become present. And you can actually go back. It was a crazy time around that point in our life, but I was praying for the Lord to give me some things that I felt an extreme deficit that I did not have or possess or would ever possess. And I had been praying for them, but I was praying a lot more fervently, because that time of like just being young and just feeling totally unequipped to be a pastor and unworthy, like, Lord, just help me, because I don't even know what I'm doing or why you have me doing it. You know what I mean? So it was a lot of the asking. And I began to ask those questions like, okay, I know I responded that way, but why that way? You know, like it's this is where it's like you got to do the work. And when we say the work, that's the work that we're referring to. That hard, ugly, disgusting, you don't want it to be touched, you don't want to talk about it, work in therapy, right? To where it's like you're not weak because you go to therapy. It doesn't mean that you're not saved because you go to therapy. I think you're actually strong because you go to therapy. You get to face some real raw stuff that's, like you said, ugly and disgusting. And
I promise you, it made, I explained this to a pastor last year. I promise you it made me a better Christian. It made me extremely self-aware. And I was never going to get that without learning how to be grounded. And I was never going to get that without learning how to calm myself down. And I was never going to get that until I learned what my triggers were.
So you're better everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like better husband. I got proof of that.
Yes.
We don't got to talk about it on camera, but I got proof of that, right? It's like better friend, better pastor, better brother, you know, better child to the parent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's at the end of the day, it makes you a better everything. That self-awareness really causes you to start to stop and say like, does this action that I'm about to perform warrant the situation? It's just like our therapist talks about with parents and their children, right? Sometimes parents beat their kid and that punishment, it wasn't warranted for what happened, you know? So it's like, okay, like I'm about to act in this manner. Is that overzealous? You know, am I out of pocket? Is this a normal reaction? Like what just happened? Like if I react in this way, will I still seem normal or am I going to seem like a crazy person to people?
Yeah.
But you got to get to a point where you start doing that work, and it wasn't nothing special. All it literally was just doing what we should be doing as believers in Christ and partaking in those things. Don't neglect the gathering, you know, be around community. Have people that can speak into your life that they're healthy so they can point some things out to you,
And
you know?
have that surrogate faith for you, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And be consistent, you know, with it. Like, come on, I didn't want to stay in therapy. Remember about 6 months in, I promise guys, I was so done with therapy. I was like 3 or 6 months in. And one day I told my wife, like, it was the same day I was going to do therapy that day. I was like, babe, I do not want to do therapy. And I didn't want to cancel because I would have got a charge for that. Shout out to my therapist if you're watching. But so I did this. I went on Google and I was like, Google, what are some good questions to ask a therapist? Because I was determined to finish. Yeah. I was determined to go. Like I wasn't going to quit, even though there was things that I didn't like to talk about. I didn't like to touch on. You rubbing and touching this area. I don't know how I feel. But I told God, like, Holy Spirit, if this is the route that you want me to go, like, I will stick with it even when it gets uncomfortable. Right. Yeah. So I Googled those questions. And you know what? I actually had a productive therapy session that day. Yeah. The Lord has a sense of humor because I literally Googled these generic or what I thought would be generic questions. And I was like, And because of that, I went back again. And then I went back again.
And you never stop.
And I went back. I'm never going to.
No,
I'm never going to. That's just something that I realized that, you know, some of us have some deep things that need to be working out, some deep rooted things that need to be worked out. And that's going to take some work.
It is. And it's just like, I think my therapist told me one time, one of my therapists anyways, that sometimes, well, first off, you know, you have one thing from going to therapy, you get to understand trauma and mental health more, and that with that comes compassion and comes grace.
Yes.
You know, for everybody, which is hence the reason why you
Big
have
time.
realized it's so important to you and how much it means to you as well as me. But you're not a bad person because every way that we are is attached to something, whether it's trauma, whether we've seen it growing up, it's the culture we're around. And sometimes, like my therapist said, you might do something that is against what you even believe.
Right.
And your own morals.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So that hard work, man, that hard work was worth it. And I'm not going to stop it. If you are in therapy and you started it, be encouraged. Don't stop. Keep going. You'll get a breakthrough. You'll learn yourself better. You'll become more self-aware. You'll be a better everything.
Yeah, you will. And it'll be something you look forward to. Trust me. I had to learn the hard way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, that's fine. A lot of us do. I did too. Most of us do. But it's okay. You live, you learn. You know, I think the important thing is to just be consistent with it. Consistency is hard. You know, it's not impossible. It can be challenging. As one of my mentors likes to tell me, don't say hard, you know, say challenging. And it does put you in a certain mindset. But therapy can be challenging. Consistency in therapy can be challenging because, you know, let's just be honest. Like as human beings, we like our secrets.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there are just some things where we're just like, I don't want to ever tell you that.
Because you want to look like a good person.
Right, or anyone at all living on the planet as long as I'm alive, right? Like there are just some things that are like that, whether it's thoughts that we have, things that we've done in the past or we think about doing, you know, like it's you know, we don't like that vulnerability, you know, and that transparency when everything's just kind of open and it's just out there. That's real uncomfortable, you know, that's real naked like. You know what I mean? So we got to be like, we got to try to be consistent, you know, even when it gets tough, even when it gets hard, but we'll get through it. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Babe, did you enjoy this episode?
I loved it.
I loved it. I enjoyed this episode. The next one will be very similar to mental health again and some therapeutic aspects, but we're also going to include some statistics, you know, within some different communities and kind of what it looks like worldwide a little bit. So you guys stay tuned for that. If you guys are dealing with any type of mental illness or mental health illnesses in any way, just know that God is not far from you. It's not impossible for you to be near to God. If you have to go to therapy or if you need any type of treatment, whether it's with pills or not, it doesn't mean that God can't get to you or you're a lost cause or you can't be saved. All of that is heretical. Let's just say that. All of that is balagna, as I like to call it. So yeah, just take care of yourselves, you know, do what your therapist or your doctor or whoever tells you to do. And also stay close to Christ, you know, go to church, have a church family as well. All of it as one brings holistic healing. We don't want halfway healing. We want holistic healing. So we love you guys. Stay tuned for next episode. We'll see you next time. Peace.
Bye.